Life is a straight line. It's full of mountains, valleys, and moments where we wonder, can I actually make it to the other side? Today we're diving into a story of perseverance, purpose, and faith with someone who has emerged stronger through storms.
Have you ever been told that storms don't last forever? Well, they don't, okay? And we need for you to stay tuned because you need to hear about this. This episode will leave you inspired and
I'm Naty,
I'm Veda.
and we are here to thrive.
Welcome to Thrive by the Rising Muse, where we explore life, faith, and mental health. Today, we are so honored to welcome Bambi to the show. Her name is Bambi Makowski, and she's the mother of 6, grandmother of 13, and counting, because I don't think they're finished. A passionate storyteller and author of 2 published books with more on the way. Her journey has not been easy, but she's found purpose and hope through every trial. She's here to share her story, her lesson, and how faith has been her anchor. Bambi's story is one of resilience and determination, from overcoming personal struggles to touching lives one door at a time. She embodies what is meant to thrive. So let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Bambi.
I am so excited that this finally has happened. This was
Yes.
supposed to happen in January. Yes, so we have been persevering. And just like you said the other day when we sent an email, you said, it's going to come out when God wants it to come out. He
Yes.
wants the steps. So
Yes.
here we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a snowstorm, and
2.
that is
Yeah.
within 2 weeks back to back, and that is not normal
No.
at all.
No, not at
Now,
all.
I
Yeah.
live in Lower Georgia. I live in
Mhm.
Brunswick, Georgia, and we got the ice.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, we
Okay.
had the ice.
Well, we woke up to a wonderland.
We sure did.
Well, so I'm glad that we persevered.
Yes. Yes.
So, Baby, your story is so powerful,
Mhm.
and you've shared so much of your life and the challenges that you had. Can you tell us about that journey and how did you discover your calling on inspiring other people?
Oh my goodness. I think that calling was, when I was like 25, 27, I had a dream, and I actually was asked to give my testimony on a stage, and I walked out to the podium and I looked out into the audience, and there were all these people that looked like homeless people, and there was a stench, and their clothing was gross. It hadn't been washed. And there was words written across their chest that it was, I'm a sinner. I'm not loved. I'm ugly. Nobody wants me. And I began to start sharing my testimony and start sharing what God had done into my life. And as I was sharing, the room changed and the atmosphere changed, the aroma changed, and it started to smell like lilacs. And I looked out to the audience, and their clothing had been changed, and they looked cleaned up, and there was new words written across their chest that said, beloved, blessed, forever changed, forgiven, the daughter of the King. And when I woke up from that dream, I knew that dream was given to me by God. Didn't know what it was going to mean, had no idea where it was going to take me. But it wasn't until, 35 years later that God started opening up those doors, big doors, for me to start sharing my testimony and start sharing what he had done in my life. So I always knew that I had a call in my life, and I always knew that I was a storyteller and I could captivate women and an audience by sharing my story in a way that brought healing, and it took the sting out of trauma. Because we all have trauma, but our trauma doesn't have to be a death sentence to us.
Right.
Our trauma is only a first aid kit. And it's a way for God to show up, in our lives when we hand over our trauma to him. But we have to stop being victims in our trauma in order to be victorious to help the next generation.
Awesome. Now, your time on the SWAT team sounds extraordinary, both the highs and the challenges. What was it like to build such deep connections with people while navigating the pressures of the job?
Starting with defining what SWAT is.
What SWAT
Defining
team?
what SWAT is. What it is that I worked for a company. I worked for Nielsen TV ratings. And what I did is that I traveled across the country, bringing homes up to be part of the ratings.
Oh,
So that's what I did. And that's why they called us the SWAT, because if there was an area in the country that needed more help, they sent us out to go out there to do that. So for 17 years, for some of the years, I worked for the United States Census Bureau, going into homes also. And then I got hired to work for Nielsen TV ratings, going into homes again. And, and there's something about preconceived ideas. There's something about how we walk up to a door, or we walk into a community, or we walk into a neighborhood, and it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, gray, blue, purple, we have a preconceived idea when we walk into a neighborhood, or we walk into a house and we're going to knock on a door. We already think what we're going to see on the other side. And when you have a job that I had, you give up those preconceived ideas. You stop thinking, because every door became different. Every door that I thought was going to be one way turned out being another way. Every neighborhood that I thought was going to be one way turned out to be another way. So my job for those last 17 years of my life taught me to meet people where they're at, to hear their stories, because we all have a story, to sit around their table and have what they call, table talk. And we would talk about, why I was there. But then we would say, hey, can we put the blinders down, and can we have a real conversation? And the conversations that I have been part of, the tears that I have shed at people's tables, the heart that has been broken and brought in, on people's tables, you begin to be a new person. You begin to be set free of your own preconceived ideas. You begin meeting people where they're at. And you begin to hear their stories and realize where they came from and why they thought the things that they thought, and why they thought that I thought the things that they thought. Because we all do that. We all think we're sitting at the table and we assume, things about people. And if that's one thing that God has shown me over and over again, the more that you assume, the more that you're making an ass of you and me.
Yes, ma'am.
But there's so much healing that takes place when you have that opportunity to be able to embrace people's lives and embrace their stories and hug them and see them as humans, and not just at the place where they live, or the job that they have, or the amount of children that they have, or whatever idea that we come up with. It transformed me. It changed me. And I think that it was another piece to my story to be able to continue to move forward into what God had called me to be. And that is to be somebody that has the courage to be able to share my story so you can share yours.
One of the things I learned from you is that you say that every person that you've come in contact with you has taught you something, has made an impact in your life. Can you share one or two experiences that have impacted you profoundly?
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you, when I was in the projects of Detroit, and I was in a housing unit in Detroit, we all have these ideas about housing units. No matter what culture you are, race you are, we have this idea of who lives in housing units. And I had a home. She was a single mom, had 3 children, had a mattress and a TV. That's all that she owned. Had a pretty rough life. And you think you have this idea that you think that, that she put herself in that situation. You get this idea if you could have done this, this, and this, you wouldn't be here. Until you have to sit down and hear her story, and you realized, the people that have taken advantage of her, the men that have thrown her, to the wolves, the people that promised her something and didn't go through with it, the people that left her, to fed for herself and her children. And here she's just trying to she's going to full-time school. She's trying to figure out a way to be able to provide for her children. And if you don't sit down with some of these women, you don't get to hear their story of victory. It may look bad, and it was bad. I was sitting there doing the interview, and a roach fell onto my, my computer. And I had to pretend I didn't see that roach fall on my computer, and that took a lot of courage on my part to say, oh my goodness, I I have to sit here and not tell her that this roach, because I didn't want to embarrass her, but she was trying the best that she could. She was just thrown a bad rap. Another story is, I was in Malibu, $6.2 million home, gated home. Went into her house. You think she had everything, until she fell into a fetal position crying on my lap because the man that gave her the house has been abusing her and using her all these years. But you have this idea that she has all this perfect life because she has a $6.2 million home. And when a woman falls in a fetal position on your lap and cries on your lap for an hour because she is in bondage to a man that won't let her out of that house, you stop having preconceived ideas.
Yeah, you definitely do.
And you start healing yourself,
Yes.
because you know that healing has to come in order for you to continue to walk and meet people where they're at and show grace and mercy. I've been privileged. To me, my job was a privilege that I got the opportunity to walk into homes that nobody else would ever walk into. I am privileged that I got to be in neighborhoods that there would be nobody that would ever come into that neighborhood. And police officers told me, you need to leave this neighborhood. This isn't the place for you. And I got to be there meeting people where they're at. And if you can't get changed by that, and you can't use that to further the kingdom, wow, I've been privileged to be able to do that.
That's a blessing. Now you talked about how your faith was crucial in your life, especially through the dark times. I know about that. We all know about that. And how your relationship with God sustained you. And what message would you give to people right now if they're struggling with their faith? Because what they see in front of them, they think God's punishing them, or he's walked away from them, or ignoring them, abandoned them. What can you say?
I would say that God showed up to a 16-year-old girl, on a bridge when in 1986, I went to try to take my life and say, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I looked down at the bridge and thought, nobody's ever going to notice that I'm even there. And I went to jump, and a police officer stopped me and threw me into the back of his cop car and took me to a psychiatric center for children. And that's where I found out that I was pregnant, 16 years old and pregnant. And I went into my room that day and I surrendered my life to God. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I just knew that I wanted my baby. And I knew that I didn't know that God would accept me, because I was raised in a very dysfunctional trauma home, and I was a bus kid. So I was a misfit. So there was a bus that came around our neighborhood to pick up the kids in the neighborhood that the parents said, oh my goodness, I get 4 hours by myself. Let's, put them on the bus. But when I went to the church, I never thought that Jesus could be for me, because I always thought that Jesus only came for the families. So if you were in the church and you were a family, then Jesus was for you. But I just knew that I loved Jesus, and I knew that he wasn't going to have me into his family. But I wanted to show him that if he ever changed his mind about families, that he could take me. And so I knew who Jesus was that day, in 1986. I knew who he was, but I was bartering with him, wondering if you save me and you save my baby, I will worship you and I will honor you all the days of my life. And, and my daughter is 37 years old. She's going to be 38 years old this year. And the domino effect of me walking through that chapter, when I think about God's love, and I think about his mercy, and I think about his grace, I don't blame God for the way that life turned out. Life is life. Good and bad run on the same track, but we have a tendency to blame God when the Bible tells me that he's a loving God. We put the blame on things that has nothing to do with him. Our enemy roams around like a lion, trying to destroy us and trying to make us believe that God is the person that's making all this happen. One thing with Jesus and one thing with God is that he didn't create robots. He didn't create robots in our lives. He didn't create us to not make decisions for ourselves. And there are bad people There are bad people that made bad decisions and they took advantage of me. There are bad people in this world that decided that my body belonged to them, and it never belonged to them. My grandpa thought that it was okay for him to reveal himself to me and for him to destroy my nieces, my cousins, but I know that I serve a God that when he takes all of that pain. If I'm willing and I'm able to give it back to him, he takes all of that pain and he turns ashes into beauty.
Yes,
But there has to be a time in our life, when I was 25, I think, I had a pressure canner blow up on me. And a pressure canner is, for canning, how when you can things in it. So we were using it to make spaghetti sauce because it was the biggest pot that I had in my house. So we were making spaghetti sauce. Well, the lid ended up sealing instead of it pushed itself because the steam was so hot and it pushed itself and it sealed the lid. So when my ex-husband came into the house to try to get the lid off, the pressure canner blew up. And so it blew up on us and it blew up on me and it burnt my breast and my arm and things like that. And I had to go into a burn unit. Both of us went into a burn unit. And what happens when you're in a burn unit is that they put you on this metal bed, they tie your hands, they jack you up with morphine, and they start scrubbing. And they start trying to take the residue of that off of you. And then after a while, when they can't get the residue off, they decide to put new skin on you. And I tell that story because that's what God does, is that there is some residue that we have experienced in our lives. And, and I'm just talking for women, but I know men have done it, have had residue. There are 2 out of 4 girls that are molested and raped every single day. There are 2 out of 10 women within the church that are beaten and victims of domestic violence. So there are women that are being brutalized and sex trafficked and everything like that. So I'm telling you that God can come in and he can put you on this bed and he can scrub the residue of what has happened to you and he can put new skin on you. And you then can be used for the kingdom of God, because scars are for everybody. Even Jesus left this earth with scars.
yes, he did.
He left, but what he wants us to do is to not think that our life and our pain and our abuse that we have gone through, that's not my death sentence. That is my first aid kit to continue to further the kingdom and to continue to be healed and set free and continue to have that new skin to be put upon me. Life is about chapters. And if there are women in your audience that is living in a chapter of darkness, I'm here to tell you that chapter is almost over. And there's a new chapter that's beginning. You just have to stand firm and stand in faith that God is going to open up the windows of heaven and he's going to pour out that blessing from you and he's going to order your steps. And this isn't your death sentence. This darkness only lasts for a while, but then you have to rise above that and be able to allow God to scrub the residue of pain and agony and the dirtiness of what people have done to you and let him put that new skin on you. And I'm telling you, once you do that and you go through the process of healing and being set free, the lives that you get to change, the hands that you get to grab hold of, the tribe that you get to build furthers the kingdom, ladies.
Amen. One of the examples that I usually use about the process is very similar. I like the analogy of the burn victim. Usually mine is if you have a cancer and you have to have surgery. God has to remove that cancer and your healing process hurts, but it hurts for a while until you're fully healed and then you're fine and functional. And I think one of the issues sometimes people are so comfortable in their situation, not because they like where they are, but because it's what they know.
Absolutely.
And they are afraid of the pain of the change. Absolutely. They're afraid of the surgery or the scrubbing, not realizing that is temporary and that what's on the other side is so wonderful and so worth it.
Absolutely. And that is so true, because we get caught up in the high, in the dopamine of telling our stories of victims. Because so many times people want to hear the dirty story. So we get caught up in that, and I got tired of being sick and tired of being that woman in the room that everybody's like, we got to hear the story again. Yes, she was a victim of domestic violence. Yes, she was raped. Yes, she, was a child that wasn't loved and taken care of. And you get sick and tired of being sick and tired of being the dirty one in the room. I wanted to be the clean one in the room. I wanted to be the one that I wasn't the elephant in the room anymore. I wanted to be the one that when I walked into a room that people felt victory, that people felt healing, and I only tell about being burnt, the burn part, because I was burned. So I use that analogy because I know what the scrubbing was like.
Feels like,
that I went through. I know what I went through when I had to stand in the mirror and I had to see breasts that weren't together properly, that were burned. I had to walk through that emotion of me as a woman. But now I tell people, I'm 55 now, and I tell people, I think the best thing for women in their 40s and their 50s is stand in the mirror naked. Stand in the mirror naked and see your body from a different point of view. I no longer see the scars as stories of distress, but stories of victory. I now see my breasts that sag, that have no gravity, as a mother that got the opportunity to nurse 6 babies and hold them and care for them. I now see the roles that I have as a mother that got to feed 6 children and find a way all the time to be able to provide for my children when we lived in poverty and we had nothing. You begin to start a different narrative about who you are. If you have I do have gray hair, but I do cover it. But start telling the stories of the gray hair, of where you've been and where you've come from. Instead of always taking the cup half empty, let's tell the stories of the cups that have been half full. Let's tell the stories that, yes, we were handed lemons, but let's tell the stories on how we made lemonade. Let's tell the stories that we were poor and people had to bring groceries to our house, but yet we fed a neighborhood because now we had groceries. Let's stop the narrative of the negativity of the narrative and allow God to come forth, that He is our provider, that He does provide for us, that He does take care of us. Let's stop talking about how many times I was a victim of domestic violence, and let's talk about how many times people intervened. Let's talk about how many times that people provided for me. Let's talk about how many shoulders that I was able to cry on, and they walked me through the victory of walking through that and being set free. We get so caught up in being victims because we think that it pays something. But you know what? The dopamine that you get when you allow God to show you the gifts is so far better than the dopamine of being a victim. Let's get rid of the dopamine of being a victim, and let's hang on to the dopamine of being set free and being redeemed and being the blessed ones that get to sit at the foot of the cross, that He gets to pick us up and He shows us that He has always been here for us and He's never left us and He's never forsaken us. Let's change the narrative as victims.
We definitely have to change our way of thinking.
Yes.
I love how you presented that.
Yeah.
Instead of lemonade. I mean, that's something that I say all the time.
Yeah.
When you were telling me about your past, I saw my past. Okay? But what caught my attention, you said people blame God. People are angry at God. When we realize the truth that there's God and there's Satan. Satan started off with God, became full of himself, so God let him go. But God allows Satan to be here in the world with us because we're not robots. God could have made robots. And we would do exactly what He said every time. But He gave us a will, a volition to choose. So when people are mad at God, they don't realize that Satan exists too.
Absolutely.
And this is what I have in my mind. in a courtroom, you have the prosecutor, Satan. You have the defense attorney, Jesus. And the judge is God. All day, all night, continuously, the prosecutor is accusing. He is the accuser. He is accusing us. And Jesus is right there defending us. And God is right there. Because you can't get to God unless you go through Jesus.
Right.
Absolutely. He's
So
your
he's
mediator.
defending us. And I know bad things happen. We woke up this morning. It's a lot of bad stuff going on around. Okay? All across our nation, there's bad stuff going on. But when you realize that God has your back, in spite of what you're looking at, what's in your front.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people woke up, they don't have their jobs, they don't have this, they don't have that. Oh my God, we pray for them daily. But don't blame God for this. That's my point. Don't blame God for what's going on.
Well,
because God gave us a choice and people are choosing not to do the right thing.
And that's what I was going to say. Sometimes God gave us free will to all of us. All of us. Everyone. The believer, the unbeliever, everybody has free will. And sometimes we blame God for things that are people's decisions to make the wrong decision.
Yes.
People who decide to be evil or decide to be selfish. The only thing God did was give them free will. They made the choice of doing the wrong thing, of being evil or, hurting or abusing. Yeah, Satan has a lot to do with that. But sometimes it's not even Satan. Sometimes it's people making their own bad decisions.
It's the own decision.
Or letting themselves be away from God by choice. So,
absolutely. And too, what I think what has to happen too is that, the Bible tells us that we win people by the word of our testimony. And sometimes we forget once we become saved. I feel like a lot of times as Christians, we just put our salvation and we put all the stuff that we've gone through and we've done, and we put it in a nice little box and we hide it under our bed. When that is the thing that needs to be open to be able to share, because we got the prison gates open on our behalf. So why in the world aren't we sharing our testimonies? It's by the word of your testimony. Why aren't we sharing it? Why are we hiding? Why is the church not wanting messy when messy is what we need in the church? Messy, we need those doors open of our testimony. We need to tell people that I was on a bridge at 16 years old ready to commit suicide. They need to know that God can come in and he can take the wretchedness of ourselves and he can form us into something beautiful. We are made in his image. When I think about how when we are born, the Bible tells us that he has fearfully and wonderfully made us and he has molded us and he called us by name, for us to come back to his glory. All of this, everything that we go through is for the purpose to bring us back to him, bring us back to his fold. But when we get saved and we get set free, when I got saved, when I accepted Christ as my Savior, my soul is gone and it's in heaven. It's there. What's happening is that now what he wants us to do is that he wants us to renew our minds daily for us to understand what the finished work at the cross did.
Right.
That if we can continue to finish what the word of God has said, that he has set me free and that I can find myself at the foot of the cross, knowing what Christ did for me. And that's all that when I get discouraged, when I go through things, Jesus is God's always saying, Bambi, I see you through my son, hon. I just want you to renew your mind. I want you to understand what I've done for you. And that's what we need to do, especially as Christians. We should not walk around as victims anymore. Yes, we've had some happen to us, but God has saved us. He has created us to do great and mighty things. And what happens if those things that happen to us is for us to be able to further the kingdom and to realize that thing had nothing to do with me. Me being raped by my uncle had nothing to do with me, but it had to do that at today, March 15th, 2025, somebody was going to need to hear my story. Was going to be able to be set free because they heard somebody else's story and they realized that Isaiah 61 is at work, that Jesus opened up the prison gates and he's let us free.
Yes.
Everything that you walk through in our lives is to further the kingdom,
Yes.
is to allow the kingdom to be at work and allow what Christ did for us. I don't think we really comprehend what he did for us. I don't think that we really comprehend what that cross did for us. What he did, that he would have died just for me. He would have died for that wretched 16-year-old girl that thought her life was nothing. He would have just came just for me. And God turned his back on his only son because I needed him. I needed him. You needed him. And if we can begin to walk in that and understand that and write our stories and share it and be first aid kits for other people, oh my goodness.
Yes.
You know, we live now in a time that we are able to tell our secrets. You know,
Yes.
we all lived during a time that things happened in our household that you didn't tell anybody. We all
What
had an
happens
uncle.
at home stays at home.
Yeah, every single one of us had an Uncle Harry, a dirty Uncle Harry in our household, but we weren't allowed to tell anybody. And our parents all knew who Uncle Harry was and how many times he wanted us to sit on his lap. Our parents knew what was going on, but we weren't allowed to talk about it. But we were all in globes thinking that we were the only ones that it was happening to in our home. Now we live in a time now that God has said, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it in our churches. Let's talk about it on the streets. Let's talk about what has happened, that now the closet doors can be open and we can be set free and we can start again and sit at the foot of the cross. We don't have to be silent anymore. You know, we don't have to hide from what happened to us. We can now reveal it and be okay and now grab arms with other people because we're not the same people. You know, one of a home that I went into was a single mom. She was a Black woman, and I had just written my book. And we were talking about it, and she said, you know, there was no way we were not allowed to talk about, you know, my mom knew that the uncle's coming to our house, but we didn't talk about it. I asked if she wanted to read my book, and she said, can I? And I said, yeah. And so I went into my car, I got my book for her, and 2 days later she called me. And I said, are you okay? She goes, you spoke to my soul. You told my story that I was never allowed to tell, and you're a white girl. That just showed me that. And her and I prayed together, and she just let go of some unforgiveness and things like that. And it showed me that there's no demographic, there's no race, there's no color, there's no payment, there's no finances that are going to separate us from the pain that we have endured. So let's lock arms together. Let's stop this debate back and forth, and let's lock arms and let's heal together because we've all been there. And if we can do that, that would be amazing.
The other thing that I've encountered, aside from people don't wanting to share, is, and as I was thinking about it here, came to me that it's probably a form of pride. People think that God can't handle himself.
Absolutely.
And they need to protect his image.
Yes.
So they can't show any vulnerability because if I'm a Christian, nothing bad can happen to me because what does that say about God? And it's like, have you read the Bible?
Yes.
You know, things happen to believers all the time. The point was at the end there was redemption.
Absolutely.
And like you were saying, our testimony comes from the test.
Absolutely.
Without the test, there's no testimony.
Absolutely.
So when people are trying not to, be PR for Jesus, he doesn't need it. Because what you're supposed to do is actually tell your story so that you can bring more lives and more souls to the kingdom.
Yep.
We can't save nobody, but plant those seeds so that they can come to Jesus and Jesus can do the rest.
Absolutely. Message to message.
A true testimony is where I was, what God did, and where I am now.
Absolutely.
I was taught that almost 30 years ago from my recently deceased pastor.
Yeah.
A testimony where I was, what God did, where I am now.
Absolutely.
That's it.
You know, I wrote a third book that's coming out in June, and it's called The God Who Sees. And it's about 20, I think I have 30 30 women of the Bible that I've taken, that I've made them more relatable today. Because I believe that the word of God is to set us free, and that God has covered every situation, every circumstance that we have ever been through, that he has covered it within the word of God. So I have taken women of the Bible, and I have didn't change the scripture, but I told their story. Like I told the story, one of them I did was the story of Eve. I told her story from a mother that would have to visit her son in jail. See her through the eyes of a mother that had to go every week to see her child in jail because he murdered somebody. Doesn't change the love of a mother, but that she showed us what it was. And she had no mother figure. She had nobody to help her raise her children. And she had children that went wayward and had children that were selfish enough to kill the other one. So I told the story, using her as a mom that went to the jail for her child every week. I told the story of the woman I told the story of Job's wife. We only have her as Job's wife. And and Job, Satan goes up to heaven and Satan says, "Hey, God, what about Job?" He didn't say, "What about Job and his wife?" But he said, "What about Job?" And Jesus, God tells him that you can do anything you want to him, but you can't take his life. What did that mean for Job's wife? We read those stories and we go, "Oh my goodness, she cursed God and died." She cursed God. She told Job to curse God. But we don't tell the story that prior to that, she had lost everything too. Prior to that, she had lost her children. And then the third thing that happens is that she finds her husband in the dirt pile covered in boils. Many of us women would go after you've lost everything, you've lost all your children, and now you see your husband in a pile full of boils. And she says, "Job, what more can we do?" And Job was going to curse God, but Job thought, what's the purpose of cursing God? Nothing's going to change. The boils aren't leaving. But she said it in total pain. But when we read those stories, we just look at it and go, "Oh, she cursed God. She told him to curse God." How about let's tell the rest of the story? How many of us as women wouldn't have thought that? How many of us as women have thought that? When you're in the midst of the pain in your life and you can't bear it anymore and you're in a fetal position, how many of us haven't said, "God, I'm ready to curse you. I can't do this anymore." And showing the compassion for her. Not that what she did was wrong. Yes. But let's look at the story of why it happened and what took place. And out of her desperateness, she just happened to be in an account in the Bible. I know that there's many times that I have laid in fetal position wondering, "God, I can't do this anymore." But out of his grace and his mercy, he lifted me up and said, "I know you can't do this anymore, Bambi. That's why I'm going to do it for you." And he understood my pain. And so the stories that I have written, I put faces to the trials that we go through as women and made people start looking at it, not denying what she did, but growing empathy. I told somebody just recently about, my salvation. And I said, when we first get saved, I think because we have been saved from such wretchedness, I think that we look at the scriptures in the Bible that tells us the do's and the don'ts of life, because we want to make sure that we're good girls for God. We want to make sure that God really, when he saved us, he said, "Oh, I got a good person over here." And then the older that we get and the more mature we get in our walk with God, we start now looking at scriptures that show grace and show mercy and show empathy. The older our children get, the more mistakes our children make. We're not looking anymore for the do's and don'ts. We're looking now for the empathy, of the word of God. That our salvation, it changes. Our relationship with Christ changes, because when God, when Jesus walked the earth, he never reprimanded sinners. He just sat with them. We reprimand sinners. We don't want to sit with them, but Jesus sat with them. The only people that he reprimanded was the Sadducees and the Pharisees. That's all that he reprimanded. But yet we're constantly reprimanding, everybody around us, when God showed grace and mercy to the sinners. I just think salvation changes. Your walk changes.
Yes.
The empathy changes. The love changes. That's why I can look at Lot's wife and I can look at Job's wife. I can look at them through the eyes of empathy and the eyes of a mother that life didn't turn out exactly the way I planned it to turn out either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. This is good, girl. When you do your book this
Comes
summer,
out in June.
you got to come back.
Yeah.
You got to. And then we could talk about those women
Mm-hmm.
and how they are relative to today.
Yes. Yes.
Bambi, tell us about your name. Tell us about what you went through, and what God revealed to you about
Oh,
your
how
name.
did you remember that? Yes. Um, well, I have a strange name. And when I was a kid, I was very bullied. When I was a kid, because of my name, we were a poor family also. And so that didn't help, having a terrible name and being poor and being bullied. And I didn't date when I was a kid. I was in the backseat of men's cars, as a teenager. Nobody loved me to date me. They just loved me to put a notch in their belt.
Right.
And so to women, my name was, meant the cute little Disney character. Oh, she's just so cute. But to men, my name is an exotic name. My name is a dancer name. So men would come up to me and say, oh, where are you dancing tonight? And things like that. When I was about 32 years old and I was married, my husbands would never introduce me. They wouldn't call me by name, and things like that. So when I was about 32 years old, I found out that I can change my name. It costs about $800 to change your name in the court system, and you can be any name you want. You just fill out the paperwork, go before a judge. So I went to the beach because that's where God speaks to me. Whenever I go to water, that's where God shows up. That's where his still small voice, I can hear it. And I went to the beach one day and I got mad at God. I said, you knew me from the foundations of time. You called me by name from the foundations of time. My mom just called it forth when I was born. And why would you do that? And I went through all this list of reasons why I was mad. And I was mad and I was angry and I cried. And I just felt like he didn't love me. I felt like it was one more thing that he showed me how much he didn't love me. And I gave him an ultimatum. I told him that I'm going to go to the bookstore. And if my name is not written in a book, I'm going to change my name. Because even then, my name, I had no meaning to my name. I didn't know what my name meant. I had no license plate. I had no flag, anything. And I went to the bookstore and I wrote my name on a piece of paper and I got the name books off of the shelf. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm not kidding. And I'm a little scared, because I gave God an ultimatum. Who does that?
Mhm.
And the first book I opened up, my name wasn't there. The second book I opened up, my name is Bambi Lynn. And the second book I opened up, I saw my name for the very first time. And I'd never seen my name before. I was in shock. I was like, oh my goodness. And here, my name is written in black and white. And my name, Bambi Lynn, together means holy child. And it was the first time that I realized that I belonged. It was the first time. And I had been saved for 15 years, but I never felt like I belonged. And it was the first time that I walked with my shoulders back, my head up high. It was the first time that I felt the crown on my head, as his daughter. It was the first time that I felt free, that the bondages of this world and what this world called me and what this world, determines what my name was. For the first time in my life, I realized that God determined who I was from the foundations of time. And he did call me by name from the foundations of time. And he called me Bambi Lynn and he called me Holy Child. And since that day, I walk with pride with my name. And if people make jokes, I make jokes too about it because it doesn't bother me anymore. People will say something like, I'm a mother of 6 and never been on a pole. I didn't have to dance to get pregnant. You just start making these jokes because it doesn't affect you anymore. It's not a red, it's not something, it's like water that just flies off of you now. When you find who you are and when God shows up and shows you who you are, your life gets transformed.
Oh, yeah.
And it becomes something that you're like, that's part of, I'm a prayer life coach now and I do workshops. I do an 8-week workshop for, clients. One of the first things I have them do is that I send them a box. And one thing that's in the box is a 4x7 frame and an index card and stickers and pens and everything for them to look up their name, for them to write their name and frame their name. Because I believe that once you know who you are, and you understand the destiny and you understand the plan and the purpose that God has from you because he named you from the foundations of time, it changes everything else. So my clients, that's the first thing that my clients do is have to look up their name and journal what that thought, what that meant to them, that they looked up their name and they found out who they were. Because I think that changes and it's a domino effect, in your own life.
Life in ministry, it's challenging to say the least, especially when that's, once you are really committed to ministry, and ministry doesn't mean you have a church or anything. It looks different for everybody.
Yes.
But it can have a lot of highs and lows. It can have many, many challenges. What keeps you motivated to keep helping people?
I lost my job in October of
Ooh.
last year. I
Mhm.
lost my job for the Nielsen TV ratings. And in losing my job, I knew I was turning 55 and I knew that it was time for me to build, my ministry and to build my platform. I knew that I had been serving God, for 37 years. So it wasn't that it was going to stop that, but now I wanted to do it full time. It has been a walk of faith.
Yes, ma'am.
It has been, people have told me, Bambi, you have a ministry, you have a testimony, you have, but it's hard to move it over into monetary without losing who you want to be,
right. And the real purpose of what you
and
have.
the real purpose, of it. And it has been a journey, but I know that when I was between 25 and 28 years old, I know that dream that God gave to me. I know that vision that he gave to me. I've been on 170 different podcasts sharing my story. I have now been on radio stations, not making a monetary. I now became a life coach to try to get clients, to further the kingdom. It's not as easy as I thought it was going to be, but I know that God had called me. I know that he has ordered my steps and I can't give up now. I decided I took some of my 401k to live this year. My children were not happy about that. But I knew that it was time. I knew that I turned 55 and the number of grace, that I needed to continue to walk this and to find clients and to minister and to allow God to open up doors.
Bambi, you're telling my story. I lost my job in August of 23.
Okay.
And I have been working for God, in ministry here and there while working.
Yep.
And out of that layoff, this podcast was born because this was my calling to do this. And I am living off of my 401k. So when I tell you, I hear you. I mean, I was greeting because I was like, oh my God, I'm hearing myself. But I will tell you something. You are probably the second person, aside from myself, who has the same story.
Wow.
That recently has lost their job. God has called them into full-time ministry. No, you're the third. And they're doing it with God's mercy.
Yeah.
And this is what I feel. We are in a time where God's calling their people to do the work in the field. However it looks, like the field is not now sometimes it's through a camera or through a microphone. But that's what we're being called, because you and I are not the only ones. I know at least one or two more people who I have interviewed for the podcast that have that same story.
That's amazing. Well, that's encouraging to me.
Yes.
Because my children think you have gone nuts, Mom. But I know that I know that I know. And I told God, I'm giving you a year, and I don't know if it's going to be a year. I'm thinking, okay, how much money do I have in my 401k? Can I last another year? Can do the, and he is opening up opportunities. I'm speaking in December, in Dallas, the first time. I wrote my third book, so it's not like I'm sitting around. I've done a lot of podcasts. God just has to find a way to monetize it, so I can survive. I'm not even asking, to be this big time. I just need
want to pay the bills without having to pull more money out of the 401k.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. I hear you. Like I said, when you said that, I was like, yes, I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you. But like I said, hearing that and hearing the other people that I've heard, I'm encouraged because it tells me that I'm not crazy, that I didn't do
Exactly.
this out of being crazy.
Yep.
Because if there's more people that are going through that same thing, there's a calling from God for his people to
Absolutely.
come out from corporate America or wherever they were
Yep.
and to start working for him for a time like this.
Absolutely. Well, that's encouraging to me because I do lay in bed sometime going, God, did I really hear you? And that's why I became, I also became a life coach, to be able to write a curriculum. I had my first client, which she's like, she goes, I've never had anything like this before. Like, I can't believe that you teach this way. And, I just want God's kingdom. I want people to think kingdom. I want people to think, and not always kingdom finances. We always get caught up in going, oh, we need to live kingdom living, kingdom. Yes. But let's deal with kingdom souls.
Yes.
Because if your soul can be, stretched and open, what more can you do for the kingdom? Like, yes, we need the money and there is money in the kingdom, like I do remind God, hey, God, sometimes can you kill that fatted calf? Can you get to that, kind of thing over there? And we're joint heirs to the, the cattle on 1,000 hills. We don't need all that cattle. We need some of it over here. But it's a walk. It's a faith walk.
Yes.
But I just know that God has called me. I know that He didn't save me and set me free from the bondages of the sin for me to sit and not share it.
Yeah. Exactly. And let me ask you, because this has been my experience, even though the financial looks little wonky, aren't you living the best life you've ever lived?
I am.
I am the happiest I've ever been in my life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't
Working
necessarily
for God,
like the
doing
gnats
this.
in Georgia. I like the gnats in Georgia, but I got to go and help my daughter-in-law. My other daughter is moving to Alaska, because of the military, and I'm traveling with her, in car, to go to Alaska. I couldn't do that on a corporate job. Right. That's going to take us about 4 weeks, 3 weeks to get there. I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm speaking in December, in Dallas. I wouldn't be able to do that. My only issue for me is because I walked away from the church building. And so sometimes because of the fact I walked away from the church building, because it wasn't a safe place. And at this point, there's many things inside of the church building that isn't safe for people anymore. We become so much like the world. So sometimes people won't bring me into their ministry because I don't have a church building, but that is also changing. That is changing dramatically because people are seeing, wow, okay, they don't walk away from my faith at all. And I haven't walked away from the forsaking and the assembling of myself together. Oh, we're having church right now. Right. I haven't walked away from any of that. I walked away from the politics of the church building. Walked away from the secrets of the church building. I walked away from the abuse that is happening within the church building and nobody wants to talk about it. I didn't walk away from my faith. Right. So that's a new thing that people that have walked away from the building is something that the hurdle that you have to overcome, that people realize, wow, okay, she really does love Jesus. She just walked away from the building. So that's a thing that I've always had to work with. One of the things people need to understand that the fact that you sit inside a garage doesn't mean you're a car. The fact that you're sitting inside the church doesn't make you a Christian either. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had to grow more tremendously. I had to grow for myself, with my walk with God, because people ask me, why didn't you turn away from God? Oh, none go with me. I still will follow. Because where else am I going to go? It's no different than Job sitting in, the pile of boils all over him. He didn't curse God and die because he had nowhere else to go. And the boils were still going to be there. Right. If I curse God and die, the trials are still going to be here. Right. So why not stay together with Christ in the midst of the trials? Where else are you going to go? Right. So dumb. It's just so dumb to me. I hear you.
Bambi,
this has been amazing.
We have truly enjoyed you. And the last thing, if someone doesn't know what their purpose is or unsure about their purpose, what words of encouragement can you give?
Well, their first encouragement is that I would tell them to go on my website, healingthroughstories.com, and sign up for my 8-week program, my one-on-one coaching program. It will teach them who they are in Christ. And the other thing is that hang on to the truth. He is the only giver of life. He's the only giver of life. And just know that life is chapters, and some chapters are rough and some chapters aren't. But at the end of our lives, it's the chapters that we get to, the book that we get to leave behind, the ups and the downs of life, the roller coaster, of life. It's an adventure,
Yes.
Sometimes you have some, you have some villains in your life and you have some heroes in your life and, you have some rock bottom, despair and everything in your life. It's the greatest story ever. Your masterpiece that God is writing on your behalf.
Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your faith, your stories and your enthusiasm.
Wonderful.
It's been great having you here.
Well, thank you. So yeah, and if anybody is looking, to buy my book or to subscribe to my website, just go to healingthroughstories.com and sign up for my website. I blog each week. And at this time you get a 10% discount on my books. If you subscribe and a code shows up for you to get 10% off of my book. So
nice.
Go on over there and let's meet together.
And for the audience, know that all those links will be in the description.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I do. Oh my goodness, I do. You guys kept me on forever. No.
Thanks for tuning in to Thrive by the Rising Muse. And remember that storms don't last forever. And you're never alone in your journey. You need to know this. Remember, if you're experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988. If a loved one or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, dial 911 or take them to the nearest emergency room.
If you think you're in a domestic violence situation and need to talk to someone for assistance, please dial 800-799-7233 or text 887-888. Make sure that you are in a safe place when you do this outreach. Also, share, like, comment. We want to hear from you. Follow us on all social media platforms. We are at The Rising Muse on all. Until next time, remember to live with purpose, faith. See you next time.
And don't forget to thrive.
Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.